If you ask anyone in Henderson Ridge about Hank Barlow, they'll tell you I'm the quiet farmer who minds his business, fixes his own fences, and doesn't speak unless there's a good reason. My family has worked this stretch of Missouri, farmland for 4 generations. We built everything with our hands, the barn, the fences, even the irrigation lines snaking through the fields, like buried veins. To us, the land wasn't just property. It was legacy. So when they built that cookie cutter development on the north end, I figured the worst I'd have to deal with was the occasional lost dog or drone buzzing overhead. I never expected a war with the HOA or with its queen. Karen Delacour arrived like a hurricane wrapped in silk, platinum blonde bob, teeth so white they could signal satellites, and a voice pitched somewhere between a wine critic and a courtroom prosecutor. She wasn't just a resident of Henderson Ridge. She was the president, self-appointed enforcer of a rulebook so thick it could stun a hog. At first, she kept to her side of the tree line. We had no quarrel, but I knew the second she laid eyes on my barn, weather-worn, practical, beautiful in a way only time can make things. She hated it. She hated me, or at least everything I stood for. Dirt under the nails, tools on the porch, freedom that didn't need her signature. The morning it began was just like any other. Rooster crowed at 5:14. I poured coffee so strong it could polish chrome and stepped into my boots with a plan. Feed the herd by 6, start harvesting the alfalfa by 7, and hopefully be done before the sun turned my fields into an oven. Didn't even make it to the feed barn before I saw it, there, parked like it had rolled out of a billboard and into my nightmare, was a white Porsche 911 Carrera, sleek, spotless, and planted squarely in front of the barn doors. I stared at it for a good 10 seconds, wondering if I'd missed a film crew or an exotic car rally. But no, it was real, and locked tight, with not a soul in sight. A soft breeze carried the unmistakable scent of vanilla-scented air freshener through the cracked window. My stomach tightened. The barn wasn't a decoration. Behind those doors were 2 tons of hay pellets and grain, and I had 62 head of cattle waiting on breakfast. No feed meant no routine, and no routine meant chaos. Cows aren't patient creatures. They panic, and panicked livestock can kill themselves trying to get through fences. I pulled out my phone and dialed the only person in this entire town who drove that car, Karen. I said when she picked up, "There's a Porsche in front of my barn. Yours?" "Oh yes," she replied, with a tone so casual it made my knuckles ache. "Had a delivery come through and needed to make room in the driveway. It's temporary. It's on my land." She chuckled. "Well, there's no sign or fence, Hank, and from the street, it looks like part of the community. Maybe you should consider modernizing. That barn's an eyesore. Move the car, now. I'll get to it after yoga. Namaste." She hung up. It took everything in me not to put my steel-toed boot through the Porsche's windshield. Instead, I called the sheriff's department. Deputy McBride answered. "Not much we can do," he said. "Technically, it's not a road obstruction, and she claims it's an easement dispute." "It's not. It's my land." "Well, that's for a judge to decide. Unless you got it surveyed and posted, our hands are tied." I hung up, jaw clenched, watching the sun crawl higher, while my cattle bellowed in the distance. 3 hours. That's how long it sat there, before she finally sauntered up in Lululemon pants and a smirk. "You farmers really do wake up early," she said, unlocking the door. "I hope you're not mad. It was just a little parking emergency." "Next time you block my barn, Karen," I said through gritted teeth. "It won't end with a conversation." She scoffed, slid into the driver's seat, and peeled off, tires spitting gravel. That day, I lost hours of work a feed schedule, and a good portion of my patience. But more than that, I gained something else, an understanding. Karen wasn't just inconsiderate. She was testing how far she could push me, and she was about to find out just how far I could push back. The Porsche incident should have ended there. She got her car back without a scratch, and I didn't report her for trespassing. But I had made one critical mistake. I let her walk away, thinking she'd won. Karen Delacour treated Henderson Ridge like a game board, and I'd just shown her that she could move her pieces onto my land without consequence. And once someone like Karen smells weakness, she doesn't retreat. She escalates. It started small, petty. A citation taped to my gate, stamped with the HOA's gold foil seal, like it meant something. Improper landscaping maintenance. It read, apparently, the wildflowers on the edge of my field disrupted the neighborhood's visual harmony. I didn't live in the HOA's jurisdiction. My land predated their development by half a century. But that didn't stop Karen from acting like she ran everything from her designer porch to my fence post. Then came the noise complaints, because my rooster crowed before sunrise, and the letter demanding I rehome my livestock. According to her, the odors from my cattle were interfering with residents' enjoyment of their morning jogs. But the final straw came when she put up a metal sign just outside my driveway, black letters on a white background, private road, HOA, members only, all unauthorized vehicles will be towed. That road had been a dirt trail when my great-grandfather rode it on a mule to deliver eggs into town. It cut across the edge of her subdivision, but terminated at my barn, and now, suddenly, it was hers. I confronted her the same afternoon, dust still clinging to my jeans from hauling feed. You put up that sign, Karen? She didn't look up from trimming her hydrangeas. It's an HOA directive. You don't own that road. She smiled sweetly. You don't have any paperwork saying otherwise, Hank. Just some old stories and dirt. I narrowed my eyes. You're playing with fire. And you're playing with the law. She shot back. You're a relic, Hank. You and that rust bucket barn of yours are holding this community back. It's time to move on. The next morning, 2 teenagers from the neighborhood walked through my field, snapping selfies with my cows. When I asked them what they were doing, they said Karen told them it was part of the community walking path she was proposing. She had literally redrawn property lines with a marker and a vision board, and no one had stopped her. That night, I sat on my porch with a warm beer and an old survey map spread across my lap. My grandfather's cursive still marked the corners. Barlow Homestead, S9 1932. Every inch of land from the creek bend to the red barn was ours. Always had been. I just hadn't felt the need to draw lines in the dirt. Not until now. She wanted a fight. She had one. I paid for a modern survey the next morning, hired a crew to come stake out every inch of the boundary line and post it. Private property, no trespassing, bright red signs every 50 feet. I even installed a trail cam to capture anyone wandering over. Evidence, in case things turned uglier. But when the signs went up, she retaliated with a speed and fury I hadn't expected. The next week, I got a letter from a lawyer. Karen's lawyer, cease and desist. She claimed I was obstructing a historically shared easement that served the subdivision. She demanded I remove my barn's extension, an extension that had been there since before she was born. I was done with warnings, done with diplomacy. I knew her type, people who think rules only apply to others. She believed money and signatures could erase borders. But this wasn't suburbia. This was farmland. And out here, land doesn't lie. Steel doesn't lie. And harvest season was about to make a point she'd never forget. So, I rolled open the door to the barn one last time and stared at my John Deere S790, a 14-ton machine of spinning blades and precision that could mulch a field of corn in minutes. It purred like a dragon waiting for a reason to roar. All I needed was that Porsche to show up again, and I had a feeling it would, because people like Karen, they don't know when to stop. Karen didn't disappoint. Just 5 days after her cease and desist letter arrived, I heard it, the low purr of a finely tuned engine sliding up the gravel road like it belonged there. I stepped out from the shade of the barn, wiping grease from my hands as that all-too-familiar white Porsche coasted to a stop directly in front of my barn doors. Again, the same gleaming finish, the same custom vanity plate, KRNLIF, like a badge of honor. She stepped out of the driver's side, wearing oversized sunglasses and a pastel jumpsuit, sipping something green through a stainless steel straw. She didn't say a word, just stood there, posed beside her car like it was a monument, and waited for me to react. I didn't move. She tilted her head. I told the HOA board we needed to make a statement, she said, gesturing toward the barn. This time the message will stick. You're on my property. She took a long sip, shrugged. Then sue me. I didn't yell, didn't curse. Just looked past her to the sun climbing steadily above the tree line. It was harvest day, and nothing, not a smug HOA president, not a Porsche, not a court threat, was going to stop the work I'd prepared for all year. You've had your warnings, I said, turning on my heel. Excuse me, she snapped, but I was already halfway inside the barn, climbing into the cab of the harvester. The John Deere S790 rumbled to life beneath me, its massive tires settling into the earth like a dinosaur waking from hibernation. The rotors began to spin, quiet at first, then louder, a low and deadly hum that vibrated through the steel frame. Through the front windshield, I could see her stepping backward, blinking in disbelief. She didn't move fast enough. I inched forward, the towering harvester rolling toward the Porsche with deliberate slowness. 10 feet, 8. Her eyes widened as the reality set in. You wouldn't, she breathed, backing away. But I would, because the law might favor the loud, the rich, and the well-connected. But out here, in the dirt, in the sweat of honest work, there was one law that still held true. Don't block a man's barn. The first crunch was the side mirror, a sickening snap of shattering glass and crumpling plastic. The second was the hood, crumpling under the sheer weight of the front axle. The harvester didn't slow. It groaned over the sports car like it wasn't even there, turning sleek curves and German engineering into twisted aluminum and flattened rubber. Karen screamed, but it wasn't fear. It was outrage. You maniac! You're going to jail! I kept driving until the entire car had vanished beneath the front wheels. A moment later I stopped, switched off the engine, climbed down in silence. She stood there, hands shaking, staring at the mangled remains of her precious Porsche. You think you can just destroy private property? She shrieked. Wasn't on your property, I said coolly, and I warned. You! She turned, fumbling for her phone. This is going to cost you everything. Your land, your house, your future. I pulled my own phone from my back pocket and tapped a button. A quiet ding signaled the upload complete. Smile, I said. Trail cam caught everything. You drove onto my land, ignored posted signs, blocked agricultural operations. You'll be lucky if I don't sue you for livestock endangerment and economic interference. Her face twisted. You're bluffing. I held up the phone so she could see the screen. A clear image of her stepping out of the Porsche, standing next to The no trespassing sign like a proud idiot. Go ahead and call your lawyer, I said. You've got one. I've got a dozen photos, video evidence, and a copy of the deed that dates back to 1932. This land is mine. Always has been. She didn't speak, just stood there, trembling with fury and humiliation. The queen of the HOA, finally dethroned, she turned and stormed off toward the subdivision, her heels kicking up little clouds of dust behind her. I looked down at the flattened ruin of what used to be a six-figure luxury vehicle. Nothing but glass shards, twisted metal, and a tire still spinning hopelessly in the breeze. The barn doors were clear, the field was ready, and I had a harvest to begin. But this wasn't over. Karen had drawn her line in the dirt. Now it was my turn to dig trenches. For 2 days, nothing but silence. Karen disappeared behind the walls of her HOA palace, likely regrouping, plotting. But I knew her type. Her silence wasn't surrender. It was a setup. I spent those days harvesting, working the land like my family always had. The fields were full and healthy. Every bushel loaded into the silo felt like a return to balance, but I didn't let my guard down. Karen hadn't made her last move, and then, just as the sun dipped behind the western ridge, on the third day, I saw them. 4 black SUVs pulling up the gravel road like a motorcade of bad news. Karen stood at the front, arms crossed, wearing all black like it was a funeral. Hers or mine, I couldn't yet tell. Behind her were 3 men in suits, legal pads in hand, and one short guy in a county badge and a clipboard. The land assessor, Hank. Barlow? The man asked, stepping out. I nodded slowly, wiping my hands on a rag. We've had a formal complaint filed. Multiple, actually. Allegations include destruction of personal property, obstruction of community easements, and illegal use of machinery on shared roadways. Karen smiled like a snake sunning on concrete. I pulled a folder from my porch bench. Here's the deed. Here are the survey results. Here's a copy of the footage. And here's a copy of her Porsche, sitting in front of my barn, under a clearly visible no trespassing sign. He flipped through it while the suits conferred behind him. Karen's smirk twitched. I've also spoken to the sheriff, I added. He's on his way. Said he wanted to be here for this. Just then, a county cruiser rolled up behind the SUVs. Sheriff Morales stepped out, took one look at Karen, and sighed. Mom, we've been over this. This land's not under your HOA's jurisdiction. Never has been. You can't use their rules here. But he destroyed my car, she barked. On his property, after being warned. After your car was caught on camera violating posted boundaries. Karen turned red. He's a menace. His livestock smells. He has no respect for modern standards. This isn't a gated community in Boca, Morales said coolly. It's a farm town. He's lived here longer than you've had a mortgage. One of the suited men cleared his throat. Miss Delacourt, I think we may need to reassess the HOA's claims. Her jaw dropped. What? You said we had grounds. We said if the footage supported your story, we might. But this clearly shows you trespassing. Frankly, Hank here could countersue. The silence that followed was better than music. Karen trembled, her composure cracking in front of the crowd she brought as witnesses. The snake had slithered into her own trap. Now, Morales said, unless anyone else wants to try and tell a fourth-generation farmer how to park his equipment on his own land, I suggest we wrap this up. The assessor handed me back my papers. Your documents are solid, Mr. Barlow. I'll be filing a recommendation that all boundary lines be formally recognized by the county. No easement, no shared access. Karen glared at me, as if looks alone might scorch my fields. You think you've won. I walked up slowly, met her eye. Karen, I didn't want to win. I just wanted to be left alone. But you came to my land, pushed your rules, and thought you could pave over history with HOA nonsense. This land's older than your bylaws. You brought a Porsche to a plow fight. She opened her mouth, then stopped. Her gaze dropped to the flattened space where her car once sat. Her silence was finally honest. As they left, the SUVs, one by one pulling out in defeat, I sat back on my porch. Sunset painting the field gold. The sheriff stayed a moment longer. You handled that better than I would have, he said. I chuckled. You don't own a 14-ton harvester. He grinned. True. Before he left, he tipped his hat. You ever think of running for the HOA board? Only if they annex my cows, I replied. The cruiser drove off, dust trailing behind him like a closing curtain. The barn stood proud. Behind me, my land, unbowed, unbroken. The threat was gone. Karen would think twice before crossing the fence line again. And if she didn't, well, I still had plenty of field left, and one very stubborn rooster to wake the world up at dawn.